The trees that never spoke. Hello, wanderer. You've found your way back to Izora 9. If you're listening in the quiet before sleep, tell me in the comments where you are in the world and what time your night begins. And if these stories have become a companion for you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell, so the silence never arrives without a voice to guide you. Now, lean back, close your eyes. The orchard is waiting. They say silence has a weight, not absence, not emptiness, but a pressure, like a hand over the mouth. The village of Harrow Vale carried that silence for centuries, a hush that settled not only over its streets, but over its very history. Records faded, songs stopped being sung, and at the edge of town, an orchard grew, one that no one claimed to have planted, yet had always been there. The orchard of silence. Its trees bore fruit year-round, heavy apples glistening red even in the frost of December. But no one ate them. No one dared. Because every apple that fell never rotted. It lay unchanging on the ground, skin smooth, flesh unbroken, until someone picked it up. And when they did, something was always lost. I first heard of the orchard in the pages of a journal tucked into the archives of the university library. It belonged to Professor Abram Wells, an antiquarian who disappeared in 1912. His entries were scattered, but one line kept me awake long into the night. The orchard holds not fruit, but silence. To bite is to forget the sound you loved most. A superstition, surely. But I am not a stranger to superstition, and so I went to Harrow Vale. The town was small, more shadow than settlement. Cobblestone lanes, shuttered windows, the smell of wet leaves clinging to the air. At the inn, the keeper eyed me warily when I asked about the orchard. He muttered something like a prayer and finally said, "It's not the eating, it's the carrying. Don't even touch one." The skin listens. That night I dreamt of trees pressing close against my window. Their branches tapped like knuckles, their fruit glowed faintly, as though they wanted me to notice them, even in sleep. At dawn I walked to the edge of town. Mist lay thick over the ground, but I could feel where the orchard began. The air shifted. The birds stopped singing. Even my footsteps dulled, as if the soil itself swallowed the sound. Dozens of trees stood in perfect rows, their bark pale as bone. Their branches hung heavy with apples, each one unnaturally bright. I bent low to study one fallen apple. Its skin was flawless, not a single bruise, though it must have lain there for weeks. And then, faint, so faint I almost doubted it, I heard a whisper. Not from the trees, from the apple itself. It whispered my name. I left the orchard trembling. At the inn, the keeper refused to meet my eye. "You heard it, didn't you?" he said at last. "That's how it begins. It whispers until you answer, and if you answer, you carry the silence home with you." I asked him what happened to those who answered. He only shook his head. "We don't remember. That's the point." That night, I couldn't sleep. The apple's whisper echoed in me, low and insistent. I tried to write in my journal, but my pen faltered halfway through the sentence. When I read it back, I saw that the word silence had been written not by me, but in a hand I didn't recognize. And outside, under the pale moon, I saw it. An apple on the sill of my window. Red. Perfect. Waiting. What the village forgot. The apple on my windowsill was gone by morning. Not fallen. Not stolen. Simply gone. Yet its whisper lingered in my ear, the way a voice echoes long after the speaker has left the room. At breakfast, I asked the innkeeper if anyone had ever tried to cut open the fruit. His hand froze on the counter, eyes fixed on me. They have, he muttered. But when you cut them, nothing is inside, just silence. Not air, not emptiness. Silence. Thick enough you can hold it in your hand. He leaned closer. And when that silence touches you, something you loved disappears. I pressed him for details. He shook his head, gaze distant, as though the memory had been erased even as he tried to recall it. The town bore marks of absence everywhere. In the square, a statue of a man stood without a nameplate. The church bell tower hung empty, the ropes coiled like dead snakes. In the schoolhouse, the children read aloud in dull monotone, but when I asked one girl her favorite song, she stared blankly, lips trembling, as if the very word song meant nothing. Something had been taken. Not once, not twice, but over and over, until Harrow Vale itself was hollow. That evening I ventured again to the orchard. The air thickened the moment I crossed the boundary. Even the wind grew heavy, pressing against my chest. I brought a lantern, but its light seemed feeble, smothered by the pale trunks. I stopped at one tree where dozens of apples dangled, perfectly still despite the breeze. I reached out. My fingertips brushed the skin of one apple. The world fell silent. Not quiet, silent. My breath made no sound. My heartbeat, gone. Even the rustle of leaves above me ceased. And then, in that smothering silence, the apple whispered again. Take me, carry me, give me your sound. I ripped my hand back. The forest roared alive again, leaves clattering, branches groaning, the lantern crackling. My lungs heaved in relief at the return of noise. But I was not alone. At the far edge of the row, I saw a figure, a woman in a gray shawl, head bowed, standing between the trees. When I called out, she did not answer. She only lifted her hand and pointed at the ground. There, half buried in the soil, lay another apple. Its skin split. From the crack leaked not juice, but darkness. Thick, shifting, as though it carried the shadow of something unseen. The woman whispered a single word across the orchard. Not to me, to the apple. And the apple answered back. I fled. Back at the inn, I demanded of the keeper, who was she? He looked at me as though I had spoken a forbidden name. She is why we no longer bury our dead. Graves don't stay filled. The orchard claims the silence left behind. That night, I lay awake listening. The orchard had followed me back. Not the fruit, not the figure, but the silence. It crawled into the corners of the room, swallowing each sound one by one. The tick of the clock, the creak of the rafters, even the rain on the roof, until only one sound remained, the whisper of my name, the harvest of quiet. By morning, the silence was gone, as if the night had swallowed its own echo. But the damage lingered. When I tried to hum a tune I had known since childhood, nothing came. The melody had slipped from me like a dream dissolving with daylight. The orchard had already taken its first bite. In the marketplace that day, I began to notice it everywhere. A woman sat knitting in front of her shop, hands working the needles, but she stared blankly when asked the pattern. I don't remember, she murmured. A blacksmith hammered iron, sparks flying, but he couldn't recall what a bell should sound like. And the children no longer played games with rules. They only moved pieces of wood across the ground, silently, without knowing why. Harrow Vale had not simply forgotten songs or words. It was forgetting the very concepts tied to sound. And all of it pointed back to the orchard. That evening I followed the path again, deeper this time. The air thickened, heavy with the sweet rot scent of apples, At the orchard's center, I found something new. Not rows of trees, but a clearing. And in the clearing, wooden racks had been built, crude and weathered, each one hung with bundles of fruit tied in twine, apples dried to husks, shriveled, yet still unrotted. A man stood there, gaunt, eyes ringed with shadow. He looked like a scarecrow left too long in the sun. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped. "The harvest isn't for strangers." I asked him what the harvest meant. He laughed without sound. His shoulders shook, but no noise came from his throat. When he opened his mouth wide, I saw it. His tongue was gone. In its place lay only a black scar. He pressed an apple into my hand. Its skin was cold, slick with dew. "Carry it," he mouthed. "Then you'll know." I didn't. I dropped the fruit into the dirt and fled the clearing. But even as I ran, I knew it wasn't over. That night, in my room, I woke to the sound of something rolling. I lit the lantern. On the floorboards beside my bed lay the same apple, the one the man had pressed into my palm. Its skin shimmered faintly, and from inside came the muffled sound of children laughing, laughter I could not remember how to make. The next day, Aunt Mai's warning from Ashwick returned to me in memory, though she had never set foot in Harrow Vale. The forest does not want blood. The forest wants memory. Here, it wasn't the forest, it was the orchard, and it wasn't finished with me yet. That night, the apple cracked open, not with juice, but with silence so thick it rang like iron. And out of that silence, a voice emerged. "You are the next harvest." The keeper of the orchard. The voice in the apple lingered long after the fruit split apart. It was not sound in the ordinary sense. It reverberated inside my skull, pressing against bone and thought, leaving me dizzy with absence. I staggered from the inn into the night, desperate for air. The streets of Harrow Vale were empty, but I could feel eyes on me. Not human eyes. The orchard itself seemed to lean closer, branches tilting as though the trees were listening. I followed the whisper back into the mist. The path opened of its own accord, drawing me to the clearing of racks where the gaunt man had stood. But he was not alone this time. Figures stood between the trees, cloaked in gray, their faces shadowed. Each held an apple in their hands, but not to eat. They pressed them to their ears like conch shells, listening. At the center of them all was the keeper, tall, robed in bark-colored cloth, his head crowned with branches bound in twine. His face was hidden behind a mask carved from apple wood, split down the middle by a crack that leaked faint threads of darkness. When he spoke, it was not with a voice, but with silence shaped into words. "You carry what does not belong to you." I demanded to know what he meant. The keeper lifted one hand, long and pale, and the apple I had dropped in my room reformed in his palm. Whole again. "Untouched. The orchard gives," he whispered, "but it does not forget. Each apple must be carried. Each silence must find a home." The cloaked figures swayed, their mouths moving soundlessly as though reciting vows I could not hear. The keeper stepped closer. I felt his presence pressing into me, heavy as soil. He held out the apple. "Take it. Carry it. Give us your sound." I shook my head, refusing. For a moment the orchard fell still. Then the keeper tilted his mask, and from the crack-spilling shadow came a memory. Not mine, but someone else's. A child's laughter. The ring of a church bell. A mother singing. All sounds Harrow Vale had lost. "They belong to us now," the keeper whispered, "and you will join them." The figures stepped forward, apples glowing faintly in their hands. The orchard pulsed with silence, thick as fog. I felt it clawing at my throat, trying to strip the voice from me, to tear away every sound I had ever carried. Desperate, I pulled my grandfather's notebook from my coat. I shouted into the night the words I had once read in his warning. The forest does not want blood. The forest wants memory. The orchard shuddered. The keeper's mask cracked wider, spilling more darkness. For a heartbeat, the silence faltered, and in that pause I ran. But as I fled the orchard, I knew one truth had already rooted in me. I had not escaped. I had only delayed. The keeper had marked me, and silence was already blooming in my chest. The last apple. I did not sleep. Each time I closed my eyes, I heard it. The orchard breathing. Branches creaking like ribs. Apples knocking together like teeth. The keeper's silence blooming inside my lungs, heavy and suffocating. By dawn, I could no longer speak. My throat worked, but no sound came. I tried to hum, to whisper, even to cough. Nothing. The orchard had begun its harvest. I stumbled to the square, notebook clutched in my hand. The villagers stared with hollow eyes. Some mouthed words I couldn't hear. Others simply watched, silent as stones. Their voices had already been taken. On the church wall I saw something carved freshly into the stone, a circle of apples, and at the center, my name, incomplete. The orchard was calling for me. I returned to the path one final time. The air was dense, heavy with the sweetness of rot. As I entered the clearing, the keeper stood waiting. In his hand rested a single apple. Unlike the others, this one was black, its skin glossy as obsidian, veins of red pulsing beneath. "The last apple," he whispered into my bones. "It carries the weight of all silence. Bite it, and you will join us. Refuse, and you will wander forever voiceless, a hollow." The cloaked figures swayed around me, their apples glowing faintly in rhythm, like lanterns in the dark. I lifted the black fruit, cold, heavy, alive. And for a moment, I saw everything the orchard had taken. Songs erased, bells muted, laughter swallowed, generations of voices, all bound in its roots. I thought of my mother, my grandfather, the children of Harrow Vale who no longer knew games or songs. I pressed the apple to my lips, but instead of biting, I whispered, though no sound escaped me, a single word in my mind. No. The orchard trembled. The keeper's mask cracked, the darkness spilling like smoke. The figures shrieked, not with sound but with a void that rattled the marrow of my bones. I hurled the apple into the earth. It burst open, releasing not silence but a roar. All the sounds it had devoured flooding back at once. Bells, laughter, voices, screams, whispers. The orchard shook with its own undoing. And then, stillness. When I opened my eyes, the trees stood bare. The apples were gone. The cloaked figures vanished. The keeper, too, was nothing but an empty mask lying cracked upon the soil. I staggered back to Harrow Vale. The villagers looked at one another, lips trembling. For the first time in years, I heard it. A voice. Someone spoke a name. Then another followed, laughing shakily. The bell tolled in the tower, though no rope had touched it. The orchard's silence had broken. But inside me, the hollow remained. I had not bitten the apple, but I had carried it. A fragment of silence still lingered in my chest, waiting. And sometimes, when the night is long, I feel it stirring. The keeper may be gone, but orchards grow back. That is the end of the orchard of silence. Tell me in the comments, would you have bitten the last apple, or refused it as I did? And if this journey through silence haunted you, Don't forget to like, subscribe to Izora 9 and ring the bell, so you'll be here when the next story takes root in the dark. Good night, and may the silence never follow you home.